Chapter 14. The meeting with the enforcer team made me glad Devin and I hadn't decided to just move into one of our apartments. There's no way we could have crammed 25 men into one of them. If we had managed, there would have been questions from neighbors, possibly management. Having a house and property of our own made it easier. Not that it wasn't still a tight fit, there were men in every seat, except mine in the living room, some on the floor and still more standing. If Devin kept the Theron position, we'd need to consider find a place with at least one large room for meetings like this. Thinking about it made me realize a good-sized front room would be handy for family gatherings too. I finally understood why my parents hadn't decided to downsize from the house we'd grown up in. Well, besides the fact that the house was conveniently located on the farm and held a lot of memories for us all, that is. The guys had brought in several dozen donuts and pastries and set them out on the table. Devin had made enough coffee to supply a small army, so all I'd had to do was grab some food and take a seat. I'd listened while my husband filled the team in on what had happened over the last couple of days, then shared what they'd found out from our kidnappers. They wouldn't tell us much, he shook his head. I'd hoped for more. They said that they don't know where Anderson and Garza are, but I'm pretty sure they're lying. I got the same feeling, Terry backed him up. Raphael gave a single nod. He'd apparently felt the same. I gave Raphael a second look. He looked tired from having been up all night, especially after he'd spent the day with Devin the day before. I hoped he'd get some time off and be able to catch some sleep today. They wouldn't say more than they're looking for Stone. If any of you knows anything about any of them, these two or the others, I'd like to know it. These two are taken care of for now. We aren't going to have to worry about them for a while, but we'll need to keep our eyes open for Anderson and Garza. I suspect they're close, if not already hiding somewhere in the area. He paused, waiting to see if anyone had anything to say. I know we're spread thin, but I want to keep at least one man on Brandon. Mike's with him now. I want you to take over for him this afternoon, Ethan. Can you handle that? Devin looked at the man he'd replaced as Theron. Ethan nodded. No problem. I looked around and realized that yes, Mike was missing, but he seemed to be the only one. I hadn't even noticed until Devin had named him. Also, Devin addressed the group again. I'm keeping 2 men on Nickie when I'm not with her, and another to stay here overnights, at least until I'm sure there's not a threat. What about the Aniquitos? A voice asked from behind me. Why do you have an overnight guard and he doesn't? I twisted around to see who had spoken, but I didn't know his name. Because we've been attacked, drugged, and kidnapped, Walt. The Aniquitos hasn't. I just don't think it's right. I really don't care what you think, Walt. I'm the Theron. I get to make the decisions about how to put the enforcers to work. If you don't like it, you can resign your position. Then you'll have even fewer. You said we're already spread thin. The other man argued. I didn't like him. I'm not sure why, but he just rubbed me wrong. That reminds me, Devin said, turning back to address the whole group. I've asked the Aniquitos to put word out that we're looking for more enforcers, so we'll likely have some applicants before too long. He paused. We're not limiting it to wolves, any shifter can apply. His eyes scanned the room, taking reactions to the news. They'll have to pass the same test you all had to pass to make the team, but if you've got any objections to working with other animal forms, come to me later, one-on-one, and we'll see what we can do. He was still scanning for reactions. I suspected his seeing what they could do meant giving whoever objected the least desirable duties until either they were willing to work with other shifters or quit the team. Either would solve the problem. I think that's all for today. If you've got an assignment, go back to it, otherwise you're free to carry on. Take some of those donuts with you. I called out. If they're here, I'll have to eat them, and I don't need that pressure. Someone put their hand on my head and ruffled my hair. Brat, Terry's deep voice behind me told me who it was. I tilted my head back and grinned at him. You know me. You really okay? He watched me closely as he waited for my answer. I'd not known him all that long, but he'd known about me a lot longer, and he was asking not just for himself, but for Bill as well. I'm good, Terry. You can tell Bill not to worry. There are no lasting effects from the latest drama. That's not all he's worried about, you know. I know, I'm getting past that too, it's just taking a while. He looked at me for a long moment. I'll pass on your message, a slight smile formed on his lips. But don't expect him to believe me. He wouldn't be Bill if he did. I left my head tilted back and laying on the back of the couch, and closed my eyes. I heard him move away but didn't look to check. Instead, I listened as the crowd in my living room thinned. Several minutes later, after the men had filed into the kitchen and out through the back door, I picked up my head and looked around. I thought I was alone in the room, but I was wrong. Nickie sat on the other sofa, quietly watching me. What? I asked, expecting him to have something to say. Nothing, just noticing how at ease you seem with all these men in your space. I shrugged. I'm used to a lot of people around. Someone always had friends over while I was growing up, and with 6 of us kids, there were plenty of friends to be around. 6 of you? His eyes were wide with surprise. Yeah, 6. I frowned. I thought my story was well known. It may be. He looked away, staring out the picture window at the mountain that stood just out of town. I don't pay much attention to pack gossip, half the time it's shit anyway. I'd rather find things out by getting to know the person or people myself. I couldn't blame him there. It's how I preferred to do things too. So, what do you want to know about me? I gave him carte blanche to question me, knowing that at any time I could just refuse to answer. But somehow, I didn't think I'd have to. In my admittedly limited interaction with Nickie, he struck me as a stand-up kind of guy. That Devin had chosen him as one of my guards only reinforced the feeling. 6 kids, huh? Were you all adopted? I laughed. No, you've met Rain. He was adopted too, as were 2 more girls, but my parents also had 2 of their own. Cameron and Brittany are the oldest of us. Where do you fall in the group? 4th child to join the family, 2nd adoption, but 5th in age. He was quiet a moment. I didn't know if this meant he'd learned all he wanted to know, or if he was just thinking. Your family know about all this? Which part? The shifting. Rain and my parents do, that's all. The rest? I shrugged, not sure how to explain it. Nickie nodded. And the kidnapping business? Just Rain. Bill thought he might be able to help, or they likely wouldn't have told him. He frowned. Because he's a cop? I gave him a half smile. I'd talked myself into a corner on this one, and now I had to share my brother's secret or clam up. Rain had been pretty open about it all, at least with the shifters since I'd discovered his secret, but then he was cool with my secret too. No. Because he's got a talent all his own. I waited for a reaction. I didn't have to wait long. Nickie's brows shot up and he slid forward until he was sitting on the edge of his seat, his elbows resting on his knees. He's not Kitsune. I'd have smelled it on him when he was here last night. No, he's what Hank calls a seer. The Lysandros? He asked, making sure that was the Hank I was talking about. Yeah. He fell silent again, sliding back on the couch until he was leaning against the back again. I couldn't tell what was going through his mind, but he didn't speak again. A few minutes later, Devin came in. I've got some things I've got to take care of today. He placed a quick kiss against my forehead. Take care and don't go anywhere without both of them, all right? I promise. I held one hand up, pinky finger held down with my thumb, while the others stood together in the Girl Scout sign I'd learned as a child. Love you, babe. I'm not sure when I'll be home, but I'll let you know when I do. Okay. Where's Gavin? I asked with a frown. In the kitchen, he said something about food. I rolled my eyes. Gavin was more concerned with what I ate than I was. On the other hand, it warmed something inside me to know he cared that much. Brandon used to take care of me like that, though not in the same way. He'd never cooked for me. Instead, he'd had my back and taken my side in any disagreement, unless it was between me and him. He and I could fight all we wanted, but no one was allowed to say anything to me that he didn't step in and take my side. I'll see you when you get home. I pushed myself to my feet and moved to my mate. Wrapping my arms around his waist, I pulled him close and gave him a quick goodbye kiss before letting him go. Take care of yourself. I haven't forgotten that you were kidnapped too, and you don't have a single bodyguard. I'll be on alert. That's how they got the drop on me. I'd let my guard down. I won't be doing that again anytime soon. I caught Devin's eye and gave him a look that meant if he wasn't as careful as he professed to be, then I'd be unhappy with him. I promise he sent over our mental connection. I could feel the sincerity he was pushing down the pathway too. I knew he meant what he said, but that didn't mean that whoever was still out there, assuming someone was, wouldn't play dirty. All right, I headed for the bedroom. Excuse me, ma'am? Nickie stood, catching my attention. Call me Nickie, I said for at least the 10th time since I'd met him. He shook his head, dismissing my words. Where are you going? To take a shower. I'd feel better if you let me check the room first. His tone said he wasn't going to be deterred, even if his words were polite. I sighed. If you must. I stepped back and let him precede me in the bedroom. I let him check the bathroom while I gathered my things, then left him checking the window in the bedroom while I went in the bathroom and closed the door.